Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Helkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
Good or bad, technology is here to stay. The impact on the role of a salesperson will be determined by how company leadership uses it. It could create greater barriers for customers, we've all experienced that, or aid in the development of selling skills, probably not as common. How can technology through gamification and microlearning contribute to our ever-present and existing greatness? Close your laptops, unmute yourself, and tune in as Bill and I are joined by our guest, Kristen Taraszewski, to discuss the gamification and training and other great ideas on episode 482 of Winning at Selling podcast.
Well, before we get to Kristen, let's talk about our book club. We're winding down the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We're on habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And from the reading, Scott, Abe really spends his time on seek first to understand. I'm not sure that then to be understood has a lot to do with this chapter.
I got the same message.
Okay.
I didn't see the second part come through very strong, but I think
right.
That's probably where we all struggle, is to first seek to understand.
Well, and that's what he's talking about, is that when we are in a conversation, and that's where it really is talking about, we tend to want to speak a lot, and we don't always tend to want to listen as well as we should. And that's where he really focuses on. Going to be in a conversation, quit listening so you can talk, or listening to respond, and start listening to understand.
Yeah. I like the story in the beginning where he talks about a person who has a tough time seeing, and the optometrist takes off their glasses and gives it to the patient and says, "Here, try this. Does that work?" And they go, "No, it makes it worse." And the doctor says, "Well, it works for me. How come it doesn't work for you?"
Try harder.
Yeah.
Try harder to do it.
Work harder. Try harder. Okay. Work smarter. Work smarter.
Right.
What does that mean?
Right. Yeah. And I think that is so true, that we see everything in the world through our own vision. And he's made that point throughout this book, that we need to be able to think about other people in a more concerted way and put ourselves into their shoes. And that's what this whole thing about first seek to understand is all about. Start to listen to people with a goal of understanding their point of view, rather than responding, rather than setting up your argument, rather than looking for a hole in their argument that you can exploit. Just seek to understand.
Yeah, I like what he talks about, influence. And this is out of the book. If you want to interact effectively with me, to influence me, you first need to understand me. And the real key to influence with me is your example, your actual conduct, leading by example, or influencing by example.
Yeah, your actions speak so loud, I can't hear what you're telling me.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I like the areas of listening that he talked about.
Well, yeah, first of all, this one is ignoring. We tend to maybe do that with our spouse. Ignoring totally what they said. Pretending, which is the yes, dear, or right. Selective listening. And I think that's what a lot of us tend to do. We're only listening for the pieces of the conversation that are interesting to us. And then attentive listening, paying attention and really focusing energy on the words that are being said, and thinking about them, and not only thinking about the words, but what's behind the words. I think that's the toughest thing for us to do, is to look behind the words at the intent, the emotion, the feeling. And he goes into a couple examples of a conversation between a father and a son late in the chapter. And I think that's the best examination, if you want to spend some time with that, really trying to understand how we can listen attentively versus listening so that we can make our own arguments, or listening so that we can say what we thought was important to say.
Yeah, the empathetic. That's so simple.
This is 5th listening level. I didn't get to that one.
Yeah. And I like that, because that's really understanding how the other person feels. And he goes through the 4 development stages of empathetic listening, where you mimic the content. I'm not sure that I really like.
I didn't like that one.
I don't like that. Isn't that funny?
Word. I didn't like that either, because
I don't like mimic.
Yeah. So what he was saying is, if you're listening to someone, they say, "I'm really mad," and you say, "So you're mad then?" It's like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, mimicking a prospect and you imitate their accent. Now, that can go both ways. I mean, and that's a risky move. You see that with politicians, depending on where they're doing their stump speeches, they'll change their accent and they'll mimic it. So I
and
think
they're getting caught at doing that now.
They are. Yeah.
Everything's videotaped.
So mimicking the content, I'm not sure I really like that step. It can be described differently. Rephrasing the content, I think, we've all taught that in sales training, is that we want to rephrase so that we show the prospect that we're listening and then reflect a feeling. So you're picking up the tone and the emphasis on different words when they share the content. And then you reflect back the content and reflect back the feeling so that you're really sharing that you understand the other person, but sometimes that other person is not really clear how they're coming across, and you're giving it back to them and they might not like what they're sharing with you. So then they might see a different position.
When I was reading it, especially after I got kind of through his analysis of listening and he started talking about different situations, I really started to think about salespeople and how important it is to listen, and how we often do just listen so we can give our pitch or find a crack in their armor that we can exploit. And he gave an example of a salesperson who was trying to really make all the great sales points, and he saw that he was failing and decided to really listen empathetically, and it turned the whole sale around. And I do think that people want to be understood versus just being even heard, but they want you to go deeper and really, again, empathize with their point of view. And he made a point between the difference between empathy and sympathy. Whereas sympathy, and I've made this point for years, sympathy is agreeing with the person, whereas empathy means I understand you. So to sympathize means I tend to feel the same way you do. So we can empathize or understand where people are coming from. Doesn't mean we necessarily agree with them, but if we don't listen to them, we don't have that chance to show empathy.
Yeah. Another great rule that he comes up with.
And then just one final thought on this that I want to make, Scott. He talked about going back to habit 4, and we had discussed this a little bit last week, that maturity is the balance between courage and consideration. Well, this empathetic listening is much that consideration part, right? Seeking to understand requires that. So he's starting to meld all these together. Courage is built in knowing where we're going, and that's the first 3 habits. And then consideration and the way we deal with people starting to come out in these last 3 habits. So looking forward to next week and talking about more habit 6, which is synergy.
Great.
This segment has been brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program, presented by the host of the Winning at Selling podcast.
Every professional athlete has a coach, someone to assist and advise. Tiger Woods had 4 swing coaches so that he could stay at the top of his game. What would you like to improve or overcome in the next year? Perhaps as a salesperson, you want to be more productive with your prospecting, overcoming objections, or delivering more effective presentations. As a sales manager, you want to create a spark within your sales team with a new message, a refreshed approach to starting new conversations with prospects, or you are looking for market-ready strategies to increase revenue and shorten the sales cycle with your existing team. Or as a business leader, you want to transform the sales culture and your value proposition for the new marketplace. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why your hosts of Winning at Selling podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Hellkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Now you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. Go to winningatselling.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself, your people, and your customers, and invest in your future. So we're very lucky today to have another guest. Kristen, this is the second time she's been on the show, and just a little background.
She's the first person to be on the show twice.
That is a repeat.
That's right.
I think 408 was the last time that we talked. Does that sound right, Bill?
Mm-hmm.
So I would
repeat, but not a rehash.
Right. A little background on Kristen. She started her career at NASA as a flight control engineer at Mission Control, and was on a team that pioneered NASA operations. And Kristen, tell us a little bit more about this NASA operation. I can't pronounce the name. So what did you do there?
Yeah. Hi, Scott and Bill. First of all, I just wanted to say thanks so much for the opportunity. I'm a huge fan of you guys. Love your podcast. Have it definitely on my list as a valuable resource to kind of continue to learn and grow, especially in the area of salespeople. So thanks for having me twice. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Love to have you on.
So yes, I started as a flight control engineer at NASA and was involved in some astronaut training, both at Johnson Space Center and Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in what we called Star City, Russia. This was when we were starting the U.S. operations base over there to prepare for the current space station program. So I feel fortunate to have been a part of that, learned a lot, shaped my approach and my philosophy about training. And we've pulled some of the elements of that approach into our current approach.
So when you say the current approach, I'm kind of curious, how has training changed, or how has sales training specifically changed over the years? How would you describe the transition?
Yeah, we're in a really interesting time in the market. COVID has changed everything, of course. Pre-COVID, most companies had sort of the on your market, set, go approach. Hope you can find the right answers that you need, which of course did not produce standardized results. Another common approach pre-COVID was, here you go, here's a stack of data and sales sheets. Here's some sales process, read through this and then go apply it in the field. So one of the very beneficial changes that COVID has had on the training market and the training approach that we're utilizing with salespeople is that what used to be called e-learning is now called learning. So there's an increased willingness to utilize e-learning, which is awesome. American Association of Talent Development has reported that 60% of companies are actually increasing their spend for digital training and training in general, which is great news.
Wow.
There's been an increased understanding of the need to give people a learning path or a prescription for success, kind of like a map that you might use if you're going somewhere in your car. You need to know how to get from starting out to maximum skill level. Microlearning is something that's come into play, which is a fancy word for breaking training up into really small segments because people remember and retain more when it is put in those small segments. And one of the most interesting trends we're seeing is the emergence of new and innovative formats in sales training.
So you were talking about gamification, and we've kind of put that in the forefront, Kristen, as what we're talking about today. And I would imagine most of our listeners, like myself, have played a variety of video games. Tell us what we would experience if we were to play some kind of a selling video game or selling this. What is this gamification all about?
Gamification isn't new, to your point, Bill. We see it all around us. Frequent flyer programs, reward programs, games used to reinforce a desired behavior or outcome. Using them in training does the exact same thing. So what we do is we combine multiple topics. We game or train on product, we train on sales process, and also customers all at the same time. So it encourages thinking in the context of the customer. So by combining 2 or 3 topics, we're training and testing to simulate the way salespeople need to think to be successful in the field.
So I'm still not getting a picture of what that would look like, I guess, for myself. If I were to sit down at my laptop and I'm going to be, trained through gamification, what does it look like? Is it a video game? Is it a board game? Is it just a reward system? What does that mean so that me and the listeners understand better what that means?
Yes. And, actually gamification can be used in multiple avenues. What my focus and my specialty is actually video game. So you literally hold your phone, you enter in through a portal, you enter into level 1, you have a product challenge or a service challenge, you have a customer challenge, you have a sales process challenge. If you get enough points, you pass. If you don't get enough points, it's back to the drawing board, do a little bit more learning, and then come back in and take the game. So it's essentially
that process challenge. Let's pick one of those things. Is it like the old Zork game where I'm going to be doing a talk through something? Is it a visual representation? What does it look like that I'm actually doing on my laptop, or how am I responding to get the points I need to move on?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with BBTAN or any of those other video games where you're aiming at a target and you try and hit the target. So, for example, a product comes on screen, it says identify benefits associated with this product. And then as the balls fly over with the benefit, you have to shoot the benefit and then pop the bubble.
Okay. All right. So there's some activity involved along with that learning that's coming through.
Indeed. And
Okay.
what the learning is trying to get salespeople to think in the context of customer benefit versus features.
Okay. All right. Good. Good.
On both parts of the areas that you shared, Kristen, it seems to be really important that when we learn something, we have to apply it. And that seems to be the greatest impact, I think, on behavior modification is the application of the new content. And I imagine that there is some reinforcement in the program that you have when it comes to application. Is that a safe assumption?
It is. And the difference between gaming and traditional training is that gaming requires application of multiple topics at the same time.
And in the second part, when you talk about the gamification, we're really getting into managing our behavior and changing how salespeople act and probably consequently how they think when it comes to engaging with a prospect. So in the gamification, we're modifying the behavior and also changing the salesperson's approach when they deal with a prospect. Is that another safe assumption? Am I picking that up?
It is a safe assumption. And what we can do through gaming is, again, simulate a sales call. So for example, the first level of our game is identify areas where our product adds value. So it's as though the salesperson is meeting the prospect for the very first time, the types of language, the types of information they need to know. And once they reach success in that first level, level 2 is now a more detailed conversation around benefits, around customer behaviors, around buying center, and so on. Once that level is achieved, then we go into some more detailed type conversations as a salesperson would with a prospect.
So Scott and I talk an awful lot about the discovery step and how important asking good questions are. Is that something that's in those kind of conversations about the questions that we can ask, and how can the game or the training respond to all the different types of things that can happen within this? Is that very controlled, or is the salesperson gamer able to kind of bring in their own ideas and mindset into those conversations?
Yeah, so 2 parts to that answer. The first part about asking good questions, that is embedded into the sales process and the customer challenges of the game, because of course that is the intended outcome or the behavior we're trying to support. The second part of that is how do they customize it? The way that we have structured our game is that there's a front end where, again, we have the product, customer, and sales challenge, but the back end allows the customers to put in their material, their products, their sales process. So those things are changing, they're morphing all of the time. Customers have a way of keeping that very current and addressing new markets and new things that they're seeing.
So you have a framework for them and kind of a guide path, but then for the specific issues or questions or items or products, then your customers or the user fills those out. The organization.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. Because the devil is in the details and the success is in the details. So salespeople need to be very aware of the specific market applications or market changes or product changes for their product. So by giving companies the ability to respond very quickly, we address those learning needs before they come.
So it sounds like we're adjusting the cheat sheet that salespeople used to carry around in their suit coat and putting it more into a video platform where we get into some of the micro learning. Does that sound like how it can be used?
Absolutely, Scott. And the thing we found in doing our research is there's a couple of things. Number one, it's hard to train people how to think in the context of the customer setting.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about that. Number two, it's difficult to customize training. So every minute, every day of a salesperson time represents revenue. So the quicker you can train them, the better off we are. By customizing their training approach, their gaming, you reduce the amount of time it takes to get somebody up to full speed by a couple of months. Another thing is finding the right answer at the right time. So through this game, you can search up an answer that might be the perfect answer a customer is asking you out in the field.
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing for me is moving from knowing the answer, or what I call knowledge training, to doing, saying, or asking the right thing at the right time, which is I would call competency. So how does gamification move the learner from just knowing what to do to doing the right thing at the right time?
So there's a couple of different ways we do that. The first element of that is combining those different topics at the same time. And the second element is the timed challenges that we have. So we put a salesperson in the context of needing to answer multiple things with a timer. So this pushes his thinking, pushes him into his discomfort level. So he's responding and reacting in a safe environment, that is sitting at his desk or in his car, so that when he's in the real environment, he's got those behaviors down pat.
So, Kristen, you may have answered this a little bit with the back end, but I'm really committed with my clients to live training and especially practice, because it can react so quickly within the role play between the seller and the customer. And that's what makes it such a valuable training tool. How does a game react to all these specific selling situations? I mean, there's just so many variables.
Absolutely. And, it's a little bit like when we used to do simulations in Mission Control Center. So it's, again, those tracks. So we have the track of the product. We test, and we have various levels of product or service training, testing within the game. In parallel, we have the sales process running. We also have the customer information and knowledge running. So it's a dynamic reaction to each one of those three different tracks, much like it is out into the real world. Again, the essence is that back end that allows companies to update their information, their products as it's happening.
With your customers, who is usually responsible for that updating? That would seem to be something that could get dropped by the wayside. I know that it's hard even to get sales managers, for example, to follow up with training effectively. How does that happen in a large organization?
Yeah, in a large organization or implementation, we actually go on site with the customer and get them set up initially. So the lion's share of the work is done in this 1-month implementation process where we enter all of their information in, and then they're just responsible for curating or updating. And typically that's, a much smaller percentage of the overall content. Typically we see HR training folks or the product people responsible for keeping their systems up to date. Good. Yeah, we also offer the opportunity for us to curate the system, but typically we prefer to hand it over to the customer.
So with the gamification, what are you seeing as sellers or the trainee, the salesperson's responses to the product, and are they doing a lot more training because it's more enjoyable? What kind of metrics are you finding around that?
We're seeing a significant increase in the amount of time they're spending inside of the training environment for a couple of reasons. One, it's fun. It's easy to access. Right. But we also use leaderboards to kind of spark that competitive nature of the salespeople. They compete with each other. Sales managers have the ability to create custom challenges that would be associated with potentially a product release or an event, customer event. So it's more fun. They're competitive. They're competing with each other. And we also have the ability for salespeople to teach each other through this tool with an element we call the course builder. They see a unique application out in the field, they can just grab some video, it slides it into a course, and they're able to teach their sales team or do some peer teaching, which has a really huge impact on training and overall knowledge base within an organization.
Yeah, the peer support, I think, is really influential when it comes to salespeople working together. And iron sharpens iron. And every time I do a class, I talk to the business owner and they say, well, the seasoned salespeople, we don't need to have them in the class. And I go, well, sometimes the seasoned salespeople can contribute. And if they're reinforcing the content that I'm sharing, it makes it easier for the junior salespeople to adapt and incorporate it into their behavior. And I see the system that you have, Kristen, is really working on the reinforcement component of training too. So we've talked about the application, the behavior modification, and then lastly, the reinforcement, which I think is really powerful. So it sounds like a great system, and it can be very effective if it's used correctly. I imagine there's some ways that customers, sales managers, salespeople can use it where it's not going to be used effectively. Any projections on how it can be ineffective when they start using it?
Thankfully, Scott, we have no data on that.
It's important. It never happens that way, Scott. You're absolutely wrong again.
I know.
Yeah. Well, and just a little bit to your point, one of my favorite pictures, and I use it over and over and over again over the last 10 years in my experience here building training programs for companies, is the triangle of learning. So at the very tip top of the triangle, we've got, let's say 5%. So listening to a lecture, salespeople retain 5% of that. So you spend one full day of lecturing that they walk away with 5% of that. That's just a terrible ROI. If you start to introduce audiovisual and then you move down the triangle, at the bottom of the triangle is peer teaching, which has a 95% retention rate. So that's what all of our programs, all of our software tools are doing, is trying to drive us down that triangle so we get the maximum return on investment for time and money invested in training.
And that's the sales guy that's up till 3 a.m. I'm playing the selling game. I'll get to bed when I get a chance.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, I mean, I guess back to Scott's question, one of the questions we do get from sales leaders is, what if my guys are in this game all the time and not doing their job? So there is a way to limit that. We have a front end or a decision that we make with sales leaders when we implement this game, how much time they want to do. And there is a way to measure that. So we're trying to address that.
So instead of parent controls, we have sales manager controls.
That's right. That's right. Well, Kristen, this is wonderful. I think it's so important to get salespeople, anybody in training, to spend more time thinking about it. And certainly gamification can really do that. So we appreciate you coming on, talking a little bit about this. Any resources that we can offer, ways that they can get hold of you if they want to learn more?
Yes, our website is 11point2.com, and that's that word spelled out, ELEVANPOINT, and the number 2.com. We'd love to talk about gamification, share ideas with companies of how to integrate that. Of course, show our game to them. We'd be happy to do a demo.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Kristen, and we'll look forward to having you back again.
Thank you so much. Great to see you guys, and keep this awesome podcast going.
All right. Thanks for being on today.
Thanks.
Well, that was great. I'm really excited about gamification. I love to play games, and I think a lot of people do. So it's exciting if we can learn while we're doing things. We learn so many dumb things playing regular games. So
right.
I guess I really don't. And I like what they call first-person shooter games, World War II type games. And I don't learn much about it, but I would learn how to pronounce Yuri Gagarin. That's a Gagarin training.
Oh,
so,
that's it.
So,
I couldn't pronounce that.
I know.
I struggle with those words.
Listen to the news from the 60s more.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Anyway, all right, let's go with our golden nugget here. This is from Ray Goforth. There are 2 types of people who will tell you that you cannot make a difference in this world: those who are afraid to try, and those who are afraid you will succeed. Kind of a crab in the bucket sort of quote there, right?
Right.
You ever heard the crabs in the bucket?
Yeah. When one crab starts to escape, the other one's pulling back down.
Drag them down. Yep.
Yeah. I think sometimes competitive salespeople can be like that. And, it reminds me of the saying that, what happens if we train salespeople and they leave? Well, what happens if they don't leave and we don't train them and
That's
they
right.
stay?
That's right.
It's like,
That's
oh
right.
no, what are we going to have?
Yeah.
So,
some companies are worried about making an investment in people. And that's what Kristen was talking about. You've got to invest in your people in order to have them get better. And I think if you invest in them, they feel you value them more and they tend to stay.
Right. And I've always said that salespeople is the reputation in action, the company's reputation in action. The salespeople are the voice, the face, and the commitment, the demonstration of commitment through their behaviors in the marketplace. And they represent the reputation of the company and the company's leadership. So
great point to wrap it up on.
Yeah. Everything we talked about, go to the website, winningatselling.com.
We'll have the contact information for Kristen there.
Yep.
Absolutely. Next week, the book club, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Habit 6, Synergize. And our topic, 5 ways to screw up your sale. So Scott and I are going to try and each have 5 examples. Maybe we'll have less if we overlap on some, which I have a feeling that we will. So
let's hope so.
All right. Go out and get better, one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.